Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to our regular series of lunchtime webinars. I'm John Ridd, and I'm taking the anchor role today for the presentation. And presenting the webinar today, we've got Ed Milnes. Ed runs an ergonomics and human factors consultancy based in the southeast of England. And in a previous life, Ed was a specialist inspector for the HSE, one of those people who are called in when the problem gets beyond the competency of the local area inspector. So hopefully he's got some specialist knowledge to impart for us today. He's going to be talking about something which often comes to the fore in ergonomics investigations, namely the apparent failings of the worker. And human error is often argued, certainly in the press, to have been the cause of an incident. And goodness knows, I'm sure we can all reflect on the mistakes that we've made with various consequences. But what Ed is going to address today is what is behind the reasons for our failures. Why do we make these mistakes? Is it really us, or is it something in the system? Now, before we get into the meat of our webinar, I need just to point out the usual housekeeping, the opportunities for you to put questions to Ed if you wish to, and you can type these in the panel in the dashboard on the right. And at the end of his presentation, I'll put as many of these as I can in the time we've got available. But if we don't have enough time, then we will put these on the website later on. But anyway, let me now hand straight over to Ed for his presentation, which is entitled, How Should We Tackle Human Failure in Health and Safety? So Ed, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, John. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm not sure if that's the right expression. I'm Ed Milnes, as John has said. I'm a chartered ergonomics consultant, and my focus is on health and safety. And I'll be talking you through this webinar. I initially titled it Human Factors in Health and Safety for Non-High Hazard Businesses. But I thought that's really a bit much. It's a bit of a scary and overly formal title, which goes against the grain of sort of what I was really trying to achieve with the talk. And so I think sorry if we could just, yeah, okay. So I think the more friendly title is probably a better one, and that's the real reasons why people make mistakes and what we can do about it. Just to give you a bit of background, John's already mentioned it, but my background to my interest in this is that until a couple of years ago, I was a specialist inspector for the Health and Safety Executive here in the UK, and that role involved investigating incidents where things had gone wrong. And more often than not, when we looked at incidents, there was a human error or a failure that had been identified as the immediate cause. But my role was to look at the underlying causes to see if those errors and so on were foreseeable, and whether people could or maybe should have anticipated them, which in many cases was a distinct possibility and really formed the nub of a lot of the legal arguments which HSE was involved in as part and parcel of its day-to-day activities. And I was lucky enough to be looking at foreseeability of mistakes and errors and so on across general industry, across a whole range of sectors. But I also did it in the major accident hazard sector, or what we call COMA, control of major accident hazard sites. These are things like oil refineries and chemical plants. And what struck me in doing this is that for the major accident sites, it was primarily proactive work. Go onto sites and advise them how to predict possible mistakes that people might make so that they could do things to stop them before they happen. But for all the other industries, all the rest of us, the use of human factors is almost entirely reactive. It's reserved pretty much to myself and my colleagues going in after the event. And generally found that when things went wrong and people looked at why, they often stopped at the immediate cause of the incident. For example, person X picking up something that was too heavy for them, person Y taking guards off machine, person's tripping on the stairs when they're in a hurry. So I came around to thinking that there's a lot more people obviously in the non-hazardous sectors, what I'd call the normal industries, than there are in the high hazard ones. And naturally, as you'd expect, there's actually a lot more incidents and injuries in this sector. But the current human factors guidance really is designed for the high hazard sector. It doesn't really cater for the needs of small and medium-sized businesses, or even in some cases quite large businesses in what, again, I'd call quite crudely the normal industry sector. So I actually thought this is an area that needs some help. It's an area that I want to focus on, applying human factors in general business and industry. And when I did some digging around, I found that human failure really is a big issue across all sectors. And a key statistic that I found really interesting was this one. This comes from an SHP report. If you're interested, I can send the link out and the reference. And it's that 90% of incident reports, and this is right across the board, indicate that human failure was to blame. So that's a huge number of incidents in normal businesses where there could potentially be real benefits from looking in a more structured way for underlying causes, not just saying person X or Y did such and such thing wrong. And one sector that I found could particularly benefit from this, from having more accessible and helpful advice on why people make mistakes and what can be done about it, is small to medium-sized businesses, the SMEs. So again, looking at the figures, SMEs, that's companies with 50 employees and under. It employs a huge number of people in the UK, 15.6 million people here in the UK, a massive number, and it makes up 60% of private sector employment. And when we look at the accident statistics and apply them to this number of people, it equates to roughly 135,000 injuries per year. And if we apply that 90% due to human failure fatigue, and the average cost of an injury, which comes in at about £1,200 pounds, it means that approximately £146 million each year is being lost by businesses because of human failure. And again, these figures, they're all based on HC reports, and I can send the links out afterwards to anyone who wants to see those. So on a macroeconomic scale, this might not seem so much. It's a big figure, but we need to bear in mind that it's not evenly distributed. So statistically, some small companies will be particularly badly affected, and others will cruise along without really a care in the world. So that's what struck me. Particularly if you have a larger company, if one person goes down because something happens, they do something the wrong way, get injured, it's not such an issue than if you have a much smaller company and one person is injured and is off sick. So that's really what struck me, that there's a real need and a real benefit to looking at how to apply human factors in SMEs. So I'm just going to run through some of the basic principles and ideas, really two key areas of how human failure could be affecting your business, and how to apply human factors and what to do about it. In other words, how human factors can help you and how you can begin to think about applying it. And the most important principle, principle number one, really, is to always try and focus on the underlying causes of errors and mistakes. These are what we call performance shaping factors or performance influencing factors, PIFs. In more friendly terms, they are basically the reasons why we do things the way we do. They're the underlying causes of human failures. And there's a wide range of performance shaping factors that converge and can determine when and why someone makes mistakes or forgets something or behaves in a way that puts themselves or other people at risk. And some examples of these are things like distractions, time pressures, working too quickly to get things done, injury or illness, medication even, things like excessively hot environments or excessively cold ones, unrealistic targets, lack of training, mental overload or even mental underload, even things like dehydration. And obviously these types of factors affect us all day long. There's a lot more performance shaping factors than these that I've just shown here, but I thought these were particularly key ones, quite useful ones to see. What I'm not going to do in this session is get into different types of human failure. Human failure is the collective name for errors, mistakes, and violations, which are the main categories of failure. So I wanted to focus on this idea of applying human factors rather than specifics. But there is a lot of useful sort of information on this you can find online if it's an area that interests you. Because it is useful to get a distinction between the different error types clear before you start looking at performance shaping factors, because different performance shaping factors can lead to different types of failure. For example, distractions are particularly key in leading to things like lapses, where someone loses track of a sequential task and maybe starts and misses a stage of that task out, that kind of thing. So the performance shaping factors do have that effect. But for the purposes of the rest of this talk, I'm using things like error and mistake and failure quite interchangeably. The second important principle is to keep asking why. When something does go wrong, it's very easy just to say this person or that person didn't do the job as they were told to. But in fairness, the vast majority of people nearly all the time are just trying to do the best they can to help colleagues and help their company function. I know there was once an initiative in the construction sector called Don't Help Us or something along those lines, which played to that issue, is that people, they found were really getting injured going off task, trying to do someone else's job, filling in for someone that they'd not been trained in, just to try and help, just to try and make things work. So getting to the bottom of it and not stopping at the immediate cause is really a key principle. This is as well why it's important to take a fair and just approach if someone's actions directly lead to an incident. I'd always recommend looking deeper into the circumstances and the organisation. And the simplest way of doing this is a very rudimentary form of root cause analysis, which again can sound like quite a scary term if it's something you've not come across before or not used, but it's something called the 5 whys, which is essentially just to keep asking why, to keep saying, why did someone do something? Why did this happen? And why did this action take place? And you just start asking, and the more whys you ask, the more you will start uncovering performance shaping factors. So if we look at an example, I'm going to I've put together this example from an office environment, the water cooler incident. It's not the sort of place, an office, where you normally think of applying human factors. But if we imagine a scenario where someone's injured their back lifting, say, a fresh water drum onto a water cooler, the first reaction might be, well, people have been told not to do it. They could have waited, they could have got someone else to do it or to help them. But if we have a look at why this person did what they did, we can hope that the approach will be more effective at preventing it happening again in the future. So we'll start with, why lift the water tank? Why did this person injure their back lift the water tank? Well, the water had run out and we were thirsty, is the answer. Why did it run out quickly? The office is too hot. Okay. Why is the office too hot? Facilities manager's off sick. No one else understands the hideously complicated air conditioning system. Why is the facilities manager off sick? And here I've been a bit flippant. Well, he hurt his back lifting water tanks. Now, you get the idea. Obviously, I've put that in just to be a little bit cheeky, but even in this sort of situation, it can be worth using this kind of basic root cause analysis to find out what the performance shaping factors are. And it really helps us see why things happen and why people have behaved in the way they do in a broader sense. And that means that the whole incident management will tend to be more kind of just and fair. And as we've seen in this example, by going through this process, we've already got some useful information to go on. What's becoming clear is some of the performance shaping factors. We've got environmental conditions as a stressor, foreseeable that the water would run out quickly, someone would need to replace it. We've got lack of training, redundancy of training or trained personnel in the air conditioning system. Also the fact that it's complicated, unergonomic in terms of the controls. We've got people who haven't received effective manual handling training, and no standby water tank fillers, so nobody who can step into the breach when Mr. Facilities Manager is away. Another way of thinking about performance shaping factors is that they're all the various things that, if you identify them, make a particular behavior more foreseeable. It's not quite the same, but as a general rule of thumb, that's an interchangeable concept. So the recommendations that you'd get out of this kind of process are things like resetting or fixing the air conditioning system, making sure a range of people understand how to adjust it, so you've got some redundancy in terms of training, in terms of using the air conditioning system. Provide manual handling training, it's an obvious one. If we carried on digging, perhaps find that the facilities manager hadn't had adequate manual handling training. And assigning role allocation, making sure that there are people who are able to do this task safely, So this is a very simple example, but it's probably conclusions that would have been reached, or hopefully it's conclusions that would have been reached without any sort of formal process, but that won't always be the case. And it's my own personal view that at least taking this kind of approach to incidents will help in the longer term by reducing the likelihood of things being repeated. In this case, we got to somewhere useful in 4 whys. Sometimes you'll need more. The main point is to keep going, and basically to put it in very straightforward terms, most of the time if you can identify one or more reasons for an incident other than person X did such and such wrong, then your time's being well spent. Over a period of time, you could also look for patterns in terms of which performance shaping factors keep cropping up as underlying causes. Hopefully you won't see too much in the way of patterns, because if you do, what that indicates is that the PSFs, the performance shaping factors, aren't being optimized as they've been identified. So they're still suboptimal. But on the other hand, on the positive side, if you are picking those patterns up, it adds weight to your message that perhaps there's something deeper at work here, something that needs to be done to improve the situation. So the water fountain's a reactive example, perhaps not even the best one, but what we really want to do is to avoid incidents happening in the first place. And to do this, we need to cut down on the likelihood of something going wrong, just like the approach which is taken in the high hazard sector. The problem is that it's a lot easier identifying a relatively tight set of performance shaping factors after an incident than it is to identify the whole myriad of things that could negatively affect how people could do a wide range of activities from day to day. And that's certainly true. When it comes to specifics, you know, we can't project necessarily that a certain person will behave in a certain way and that will put them at risk. But what you can do is take a broad look, across the board at performance shaping factors. But again, you still might be wondering why. So without wanting to make this too much of a kind of self-promoting talk, in view of my kind of findings and my interest in this area, I've put together a guidance document which includes a checklist to help people take a proactive approach to human failure. And you can download this. It's on the resources page. You can download this free from my website. And essentially, it's a document which covers the whole range of performance shaping factors that you may come across in the normal course of business in sort of this normal industry. So industries outside of the high hazard sector. And I've created it specifically to help businesses, from anyone from a sort of small craft manufacturing business through to large offices or shops or factories or even construction sites. And I've made the guidance as general and approachable as possible. Obviously, I've taken it out of that the high hazard kind of framework which you find in something like HSG 48, which is the HSE guidance. But obviously, if you are interested in this, if you download it, I'd value any feedback. If you do decide to take it further and give it a go and see where it takes you. Essentially, the idea in the document is that there are prompts and guidance which help you to decide what the issues are to focus on, what the performance shaping factors might be that are negatively affecting work and health and safety issues. There are indicators, sort of traffic light system of whether you ought to be looking in more detail at certain issues. And the arrows down the right-hand side link you to guidance relevant to the various prompts. So as I say, if you're interested, download it. It is free. Have a look and see if it's useful, or if you've got any feedback, positive or negative. I'd be very interested in that. So I'm just going to finish with 5 key messages, which include some messages in addition to what I've already spoken about. For anybody that's looking to take this further, looking to manage human factors and the risk of human failure. The first key message, as I've said, is always keep asking why. Make sure as far as possible you can get to the bottom of things, identify all the reasons behind the incidents and injuries. As a rule of thumb, I would say if you stop at saying, well, it just happened because person X did something wrong, then in all likelihood you are missing out on identifying underlying causes, which makes it more likely that the same incident could be repeated. The second message is to make good use of near-miss data. And combined with this, make sure that when you're investigating incidents that you're taking a sort of just and fair approach in terms of allocating blame. It's not the same as a no blame culture. I'd always say that blame should probably be allocated. It's fair to allocate that where it's due, but it's part of the learning cycle. But it's important to make sure it's done in a consistent and transparent way, and that's, I think, what this process would help you with. It doesn't involve all the blame being lumped just on one person's head. It's clear to everyone if there are wider issues that are being taken into account. Third key message is quite a specific one, but it's something that what I found in incident investigations just kept coming up again and again, is this point that if you tell someone how to do a job, it's absolutely not the same as saying you mustn't do X, Y, and Z. So people stray outside their normal work activities. So I can't really emphasize that one enough. It's just to bear in mind that telling someone the right way of doing something is not exactly the same as spelling out exactly what they're not to do. The fourth key message really applies more to manufacturing and services sectors, although it can have its place in an office setting as well. And that is to provide some level of supervision for all staff, even if they're experienced, even if they work remotely, to try and look for ways to make sure that as far as possible, safety behaviours, following safety protocols and so on is measurable and auditable. So where you don't want people to feel like Big Brother is watching them. In my experience, people feeling at some level that if they do things the wrong way, it could be found out, it could be discovered, there could be repercussions, then that is a very powerful barrier still to human failure, in particular violations. So people consciously doing things in a way that they know they ought not to. And the fifth and final key message is simply just to be proactive, to try and manage performance shaping factors, and to try and look for ways to fix and resolve underlying causes of mistakes, errors, violations, before they actually result in someone being harmed. And that's really the main point of this talk, is that human factors is not the sole reserve of high hazard industries, as is sometimes perceived, I think. It's got huge purpose and potential benefits, from very small businesses up to very large ones. And assessing and identifying room for improvement in performance shaping factors is a really valuable exercise for all businesses. And the final point is that even if the health and safety issues are minimal, even if you think, well, there's not many issues related to those, the same kinds of principles can actually be applied to job performance, productivity, work quality, and so on. Where there are shortfalls in these, again, you can use the same processes to identify the underlying causes, and obviously reap the benefits from taking that approach. So I've rattled through that, which I hope you found interesting. That's everything from me. And I think I'm handing back now to John, who's going to put some of your questions to me. Thanks again. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Ed. Yeah, I mean, I was just running things over in my head while you're going through those main messages at the end, and wondering how it might be applied to things like quality issues and productivity. And I guess with a little bit of thought, yeah, those same questions or principles can be, which is excellent. I think we can all take those messages away and start applying them in a whole host of different areas. So maybe even this afternoon, I can see many of us going off and doing some root cause analyses this afternoon. Well, maybe not this afternoon, next week perhaps. But excellent, thank you, Ed, for that. It's given me certainly a lot to think about. While we're waiting for any questions to come through, can I just ask you, do you see this as being a sort of looking at people's behaviour in work situations? I mean, something that you were really talking about at the end there, about how people don't like to do things because they think they're going to get punished, or don't like to report near misses, perhaps. Is this a behavioural safety approach that you're promoting?
I think it's different really. It can work very well sort of hand in hand with behavioural safety, but it's different in the sense that behavioural safety, in a kind of nutshell, is defining safe and unsafe behaviours and essentially rewarding safe behaviors and finding ways to discourage people from the unsafe. And I think this works quite well with that. But I think rather than taking that kind of slightly reactive approach that behavioral safety can sort of take on board, I think what I'm proposing or what I'm suggesting is something which looks before the event, which preempts those behaviors. So rather than having to create these sets of rules and so on for behavior, is to actually look at why are people behaving like that in the first place. Because it's all very well having a behavioral safety system and saying people need to behave this way, that way, but unless these underlying conditions and expectations are in tune with that, unless they're in step with that, then it makes applying things like behavioral safety a lot more difficult, I think. So that's where I think the two kind of work together very well. Yeah, does that help, Sean?
Yes, yeah, indeed. I think it obviously reinforces the message that you've been going through. Just looking at some of the points we've made, someone is asking here, are there any tips on how to take a company from the blame culture or from a blame to a no blame culture? And I guess that's part of what you've just been saying. It's important to look at behaviour, but yeah, do you have any other tips?
I think there has been some interesting work being done on this. I think, yeah, as I say, a blame culture obviously isn't really ultimately going to help anyone, and the expression, the concept that I like is a just culture, because as I say, I think it's important where blame is due to make sure that's allocated, but that it's allocated across the board. So through all kind of levels of hierarchy in a company, so that you're tracing back these underlying causes. Even things like decisions on funding for interventions, safety interventions, and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think it's in terms of a just culture. There's been some interesting work done, I know, by the Civil Aviation Authority. They had quite a large initiative. So if you were to visit the CAA website, there is quite a lot of useful information on just culture on there. And that's where I'd advise people to initially look. But yeah, it's an interesting area, and I think you can't really have that kind of just culture unless you take this approach of looking towards the underlying factors. Yeah. Does that help? Does that answer things?
I hope so.
Hopefully.
The arbiter of that will be the person who asked the question. But yeah, thanks for that. And they can. Oh yeah, and they have come back and said yes, thanks.
Okay.
And someone else is just asking. Well, very pleased with the information, but just wanting to get the not the checklist, but your guide and so forth, and downloading it. But that's all we've got to do there is really go to your website, and it's there as some sort of button to press and download it, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. It's there's a resources page on the website, and if you look down there, there's a few different bits and pieces on there, and the human factors guidance is there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what it is, it's a PDF. But it's a PDF that you can type into, and it's got some slight activity in it. So in terms of the traffic light system in there that changes color, and you can type in. So you can then type in and save that document. Obviously under a different name. You can save it locally. So as I say, yeah, although it's a PDF, it's something that you can interact with.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because I saw some of your pages that you click onto. That obviously you can only do online, so to speak. You can't download and then click onto the further information sort of bits. But I'm sure. Let's not get into that now. I'm sure once I have a look at or people have a look at the website, we can see
sure.
that.
That's fine. I mean, absolutely. It's a file, and you just download it, and then you can use it offline. So you don't need to be online to use it. It is basically just a PDF file. Yeah. Yep.
Do you see that system can be used for specific problems such as musculoskeletal issues for people perhaps working at the office desk? you know, if they've turned up with a, well, let's take the backache or something,
Mm.
it's not something that they've done wrong, but can we uh, adapt that approach to looking at those sorts of problems?
I think you could try, certainly. Yes, it's not the perhaps the most kind of obvious area to use that in, but I think it's useful. I mean, I think it's always useful, I think, when someone reports musculoskeletal issues at work, is to try and really get to the bottom of why that's happened, what the causes might be. Um, and I think we kind of, as yourself and myself, John, as assessors, we would do that. But I think for duty holders, for facilities managers and HR personnel, I think, yes, it's a useful approach to take, definitely, just
Yeah,
to try
yeah,
and work out
yeah,
exactly why these things are happening. And I think as well, it's useful to look at people's behaviours in relation to their desks and their workstations. And you could be looking at things like why people haven't adjusted their chairs when perhaps they've been trained and they know how to do it, why the screens are at sort of funny angles and this kind of thing. So yes, I think it's an approach that could be used as a general approach, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that's you know, well, I was going to say we've all got kids, but that's may well
Yeah.
not be true. But with kids always asking the question why. I mean, I think it's just a simple approach to all of this. Why don't people adjust their chairs? Why don't they adjust their screens? Yeah, you're quite right. We could.
Yeah.
It's something that very easily comes to us, and we should just pursue it because there probably are the trends that you were talking about earlier that are there, and we need to realise. Well, perhaps we do need a special training course in this, that, or the other. Yeah. I think it can be applied. So excellent. Thanks for that.
Good.
Um, one more, someone has said, if I read this out, there are many coma sites which have human factors in their daily thinking, but within those sites there are non-major accident hazards which still need a knowledge of the influence of human factors. Uh, it's worth remembering and reminding us all of this. Uh, I think probably that's, yes, it's not actually a question as such, but that's probably one that needs expanding with the author, and I'll perhaps ask you to communicate directly
Sure.
with them later on. But no, that's excellent, and I think as as everyone knows, we try to keep these webinars to time, and if there are any more questions that I've missed coming through, then we will put these to Ed offline and get those then put back up on the Posturite website together with the a video or recording of the presentation, so that you can have a look at it again or pass it on to colleagues and so forth. Because I think there's general feeling that it was very interesting and useful presentation. So Ed, again, thanks very much for your time and for presenting that.
Okay.
And indeed, thank you to everyone else for taking the time to join us in this webinar. And to everybody, have a great afternoon and weekend. So cheerio.
Thanks very much, John.